In the annals of heavy metal, Jake E. Lee has never been frequently mentioned. He never made headlines for bar fights, bragged about hits with millions of views, or smashed guitars on stage. However, Bark at the Moon was written by him. The exact tune that helped Ozzy Osbourne return to the top of the charts following the untimely loss of Randy Rhoads. Additionally, he was the one whose name was subtly taken out of the composition credits, disappearing from view without voicing any grievances. Titles were never Jake's thing. He demonstrated his excellence without the spotlight. His guitar and an unafraid stillness were the only things he brought with him on his more than 4 decades of travel. Jake opted to remain behind the curtain as everyone else sought the limelight. He just played and let his guitar speak for him while others cried out to be heard. What, then, caused a talented artist like Jake E. Lee, who was once referred to as the link between Zakk Wylde and Randy Rhoads, to be silent for decades? Why does the list of great guitarists so frequently omit someone who contributed to the sound of a crucial period in Ozzy's career? His calm but stormy life, in which the spotlight never fully concealed the scars beneath it, holds the key to the solution. Early life. Jake E. Lee was born Jake E. Lou Williams in Norfolk, Virginia, on February 15, 1957. His father was Welsh and his mother was Japanese, which was an unusual pairing in an America still plagued by bigotry at the time. When he was a little boy, the family relocated to San Diego, where Jake spent his formative years in silence, torn between 2 worlds that he didn't really belong to. Jake was frequently made fun of at school for his Asian appearance, especially his tiny eyes and unusual skin tone. He once claimed that he felt alienated from a young age since he was neither Japanese enough to really comprehend his mother's heritage nor American enough to be completely accepted. As a result, he became reclusive, introverted, and almost cut off from the outside world aside from music. From the age of 6, Jake was compelled to learn classical piano by his stern and moral mother. For years, Jake practiced for hours every day while being prohibited from engaging in fantasy or listening to rock music. But a different kind of musician would subsequently be shaped by that foundation. Guitarist who gave careful consideration to harmony, structure, and melodic depth in addition to playing quickly. Jake discreetly turned to playing the guitar at the age of 13, not because he was rebelling but rather because the 6-string instrument offered him a sense of freedom that the piano was never able to provide. He started listening to bands his mother would never let in the house, such Ritchie Blackmore, Jimi Hendrix, and Led Zeppelin. Jake didn't ask, though. He simply played and listened. To the extent that he could. From a youngster constrained by strict regulations, he discreetly made his own way out. He didn't act out in defiance or protest verbally. He decided to use silence as his shield and music as his weapon. Jake E. Lee became quiet, free, and unlike everyone else as a result of those years of self-discipline and seclusion. Jake E. Lee didn't make a big splash when he first started his career in rock. There was no million-dollar deal or viral demo. Like the guy himself, he had a modest and difficult start to his profession. Jake began playing in a few local bands in San Diego after becoming proficient on the guitar as a teenager, using them as stepping stones. He decided to leave home during the late 1970s and move to Los Angeles, where all young guitarists thought their dreams could start. However, LA was unwelcoming. Thousands of faces and hundreds of bands are vying for attention. Before playing for Mickey Rat, the precursor to the glam metal band that would eventually become Rat, Jake was a member of a band named Teaser. Even though he didn't remain long, this time helped him hone his stage presence and provided him with access to the Sunset Strip's underground scene, where artists like Eddie Van Halen, Warren DeMartini, and George Lynch had established themselves. After that, Jake joined Roughcut, a band led by Ronnie James Dio's wife, Wendy Dio. The fact that Wendy presented Jake to Sharon Osbourne at a time when Ozzy was looking for a replacement for Randy Rhoads, the guitar virtuoso who had recently passed away in a plane crash, made this a pivotal moment. It was a quiet yet intense audition. Jake was asked to compete against George Lynch, a guitarist who was already well known. Both were amazing, and Ozzy subsequently acknowledged that he was really perplexed. However, Jake performed a previously unheard impromptu riff after a disastrous rehearsal. "This guy is crazy, and I like it," Ozzy added, turning to face Sharon. Jake was hired due to his modest bravery rather than his celebrity. The way he maintained complete control while pushing the guitar to its limits. That was just what Ozzy needed following the sad loss of Randy Rhoads. Thus, Jake E. Lee made his official entrance into the heart of heavy metal, where every spotlight shone brightly and every error was amplified, from a musician hidden in the shadows of local bars. But he chose what he knew best rather than being afraid. Just a soft grasp of the guitar, no fancy words, no phony enthusiasm. Sadly, his name would be removed from the credits of his debut album, Success Career, just as he was about to pen the most spectacular chapter of his career. With the publication of Bark at the Moon in 1983, Jake E. Lee made his formal debut as lead guitarist for Ozzy Osbourne. The album's sound changed, becoming sharper and more contemporary with a close union of intricate harmonic concepts and vintage metal riffs. From rock and roll rebel to Center of Eternity, Jake's fingerprints could be heard in every song, from the soaring solos to the unrelenting rhythms. Nevertheless, Ozzy Osbourne was the sole name listed in the composition credits. The album's most famous song, Bark at the Moon, was composed by Jake using guitar concepts he had been working on since his time in Rough Cut. However, Jake responded bluntly when asked why his name wasn't included as a co-writer. "They gave the contract to me. Sharon warned me that I would lose my job if I didn't sign it. I thus gave him no compositional rights when I signed that deal." Since he had signed decades later, Jake was not compensated with royalties, acknowledged as a co-creator, or given any legal remedy. Despite the fact that Ozzy did not compose a large portion of the song, Bark at the Moon was nevertheless regarded as his work. But from a long-haired, silent guitarist who stood in the background. However, Jake persisted. Later, he and Ozzy recorded The Ultimate Sin, 1986, which was more in line with the glam metal sound of the time. Shot in the Dark turned into a huge hit. The tour sold out all over the world, and its video was shown on MTV constantly. Jake played guitar on stage as if he were communicating with his soul. He lacked Zakk Wylde's ostentatious theatrics and heavy-handed bluster, yet his style was no more neoclassical than Rhodes. Jake's playing was sharp, precise, and devoid of any wasted notes, as if he had been injured. However, another blow was delivered before the lights went out. Jake read the news after the Ultimate Sin tour and discovered he had been sacked. No warning, no call. One day, Zakk Wylde was introduced as Ozzy Osbourne's new guitarist by the headlines. Jake wasn't there. No justification. His place was taken away from him for the second time. Once more, through the efforts of Sharon Osbourne, the same individual who had convinced him to sign away his rights. Jake departed in silence, just as he had arrived, without a complaint or legal action. But he had a profound scar behind that stillness. He never received the credit he deserved for the sweat and love he put into the music, not because he lost his job. Jake didn't let resentment to overcome him, though. He decided to establish his own band, Badlands, rather than adhering to a well-known name. Although it wasn't a safe decision, Jake saw it as the only way to protect his dignity in setbacks, the last things he had left in the brutal world of rock. The quiet strikes that destroy faith. Jake E. Lee did not opt to stay silent indefinitely after leaving Ozzy Osbourne's band. He founded Badlands, a legendary hard rock band founded in 1988 on unadulterated strength and unadulterated determination. Bassist Greg Chesson, drummer Eric Singer, who would go on to become famous with Kiss, and former Black Sabbath temporary singer Ray Gillen all contributed scorching vocals to the ensemble. Jake put all of his faith in this endeavor. No more restrictions or unjust contracts, just music in its most unadulterated state. The 1989 debut album, Badlands, was widely praised. Badlands offered heavy blues-infused sound evocative of Led Zeppelin's physical graffiti era, rather than adopting the glam metal fad that was sweeping MTV. Ray Gillen's powerful vocals and Jake's sophisticated guitar playing were hailed by critics, but as the band was starting to establish itself, the grunge trend was taking off, making way for bands like Badlands that were traditionally honest. The band's originality was further pushed with their second album, Voodoo Highway, 1991, but internal strife started to show. The label started putting pressure on Jake to change their sound to suit the shifting market tastes, which exacerbated tensions between Ray and the other members over creative direction. Jake declined. He was not interested in copying Alice in Chains or Soundgarden. For him, it didn't matter if it meant losing profits in order to preserve creative integrity. The most devastating blow then arrived. Jake's bandmate, Buddy, and the voice behind the heartfelt songs he had penned, Ray Gillen, was afflicted with AIDS. He was unable to tour or record as his disease worsened, and he died in December 1993 at the age of 34. Those close to Jake said he was devastated, not just because he had lost a friend but also because he had lost the final hope that a band might make it on music alone. Jake made no public remarks and did not participate in any interviews. Jake essentially vanished from the music world following Ray's passing. He declined interviews, declined offers of collaboration, and never put out an album. He did not perform at any shows or festivals for almost 10 years. There were rumors that he had gotten a regular job to make ends meet, retired, or had fallen into a depression. However, Jake never provided an explanation, so nobody was certain. He simply stopped talking. Jake didn't quietly release a solo album until 1996. A delicate pink mist, an unpromoted instrumental record that resembled a personal letter to those who were still aware of his identity. Then, in 2005, he made a retracement and disappeared once more. Jake E. Lee's name then unexpectedly surfaced in a local Las Vegas news item in 2024, following years of silence. While walking his dog close to his house, he had been shot several times. The reason is still a mystery. But Jake needed emergency care after suffering severe injuries to his back, arm, and leg. Fortunately, none of the bullets hit his essential organs. The man lived in silence once more. Later, when asked if he was upset, Jake's response chilled me to the bone. In my life, I have been shot numerous times. This was the first time a real gun was used. No rant. Don't yell. With eerie silence, Jake E. Lee absorbed every blow life threw at him. Perhaps the weight of his suffering is greater than any shout could ever be because of that same stillness. Private life. Jake E. Lee has always been a silent shadow in a world where artists frequently display every private moment on magazine covers or social media timelines. He doesn't share selfies with celebs at dinner. In his more than 40 years in the music business, Jake has never been married, has no kids, and has hardly ever made his love relationships public. Few people are aware of who he is dating, who he lives with, or what his family status is. That may seem like a meaningless life to many, but Jake sees it as a decision. He used to reside in a small home outside of Las Vegas. One location that appeared to bring him tranquility. No paparazzi, no fans congregating. Only a collection of guitars hanging peacefully on the walls, his dogs, and old amplifiers. In a rare interview in the early 2000s, he stated, "I just want to live, I don't like crowds, and I'm not cut out for this thing called industry networking." Although Jake has never looked back, fans and other musicians have frequently lamented that he didn't continue to be in the spotlight. He knew his value without a crowd. Jake learned to keep a safe distance from the world outside of music after being betrayed in the music industry, being erased by Ozzy, and being fired without saying a word. His stillness was protection, not vulnerability. He realized that you run a greater danger of getting hurt the more you say. Some claimed he became addicted during his protracted absence, while others claimed he got bankrupt. However, the reality was straightforward. Jake had a good life. He continued to write and play. He simply kept it a secret. He believed that a live feed was unnecessary for art. At 2 a.m, the sound of true music filled a silent room, while no one was observing or passing judgment. And Jake's relationship with the guitar was one that lasted a lifetime. He cleaned, adjusted, and rested his instruments on a regular basis, treating them with the same consideration that one would give to a lover. He has owned one guitar for more than 30 years, even though the wood is damaged and the paint is flaking. Never traded for a later model or sold. Like him, he is old and out of style, but he never betrays himself. Jake E. Lee might have believed that love was never about a single woman. It was a love of solitude, freedom, and music unadulterated by fashions and markets. He lived alone because he needed something that the world couldn't provide, not because no one else needed him. Quiet. Legacy and influence. Jake E. Lee's name may not be particularly prominent if you only look at the charts or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There are no multi-platinum solo albums by him. He isn't listed on the Walk of Fame in Hollywood. He was never the brand ambassador for any significant guitar manufacturer. However, one of the most well-liked guitarists in the community is Jake E. Lee. Not because he is well-known, but rather because he is truthful. Many artists, including Zakk Wylde, Nuno Bettencourt, John 5, and Dimebag Darrell, all provided the same response when asked what makes Jake unique. He had a special capacity to combine melody, technique, and emotion in a way that no one else could. Jake wasn't just shredding to brag. He didn't try to outplay anyone by racing over the fretboard. Each riff he played had a beginning, almost like a short novel, climax, and a conclusion that astounded the audience. Bark at the Moon is a striking example of his talent, despite the fact that his name was removed from the composition credits. Ozzy's style took on a whole new taste because to the soaring, dramatic, yet musically based solos. True fans know that Jake, and no one else, was the album's soul despite its lack of official acknowledgement. Jake showed a different side of himself with Badlands. Not only as a guitarist but also as a songwriter and conductor. Badlands is currently regarded as one of the most underappreciated bands of the 1980s and 1990s, despite being eclipsed by the grunge movement. Because of its structure and emotional depth, critics have likened their debut album favorably to Led Zeppelin IV and Appetite for Destruction. However, Badlands never had the opportunity to achieve the same level of fame as those renowned records, since they were forgotten before they could be completely comprehended. Similar to Jake. Unfortunately, a large portion of Jake's contribution to rock history has been subtly altered. His name is occasionally merely mentioned as a footnote among Ozzy's guitarists on Wikipedia. He frequently misses reunion performances. However, his sound persists even when he is not visible. In the way a new generation of guitarists phrase their songs, in the way they manipulate melody, and in the implicit recognition that no one has ever played like Jake and never will. Jake E. Lee is a living example of how you may make an impact without receiving accolades. Being ingrained in a genre's DNA doesn't require you to be referred to as a legend. Although he doesn't have a statue, his influence is alive and well, subtly permeating every song and every riff like the quietest voice in the room but one that commands attention in silence. Current life. In October 2024, Jake E. Lee faced a significant turning point after years of living in tranquil seclusion. He was shot 3 times in the early morning hours when he was walking his dog close to his Las Vegas home, once in the arm, once in the thigh, and once in the back. His lung was injured and a rib was cracked by the gunshot wound to his back. Thankfully, no essential organs were hit by any of the gunshots, and he was taken to intensive care while still conscious. After he recovered, Jake disclosed that the incident happened when he confronted 2 robbers who were trying to take a neighbor's motorcycle. He made an effort to verbally defuse the situation, but it soon got out of hand and turned violent. Jake E. Lee is currently undergoing recovery and has resumed playing the guitar. With his band Red Dragon Cartel, he announced his plan to finish the long-delayed world tour that had been postponed because of the COVID-19 outbreak. Despite having a prior diagnosis of carpal tunnel syndrome, additional testing indicated that his right hand's problem was cartilage loss. Instead of having surgery, Jake decided to adjust by learning to play with more elbow movement and coping with the pain any way he saw fit. Jake E. Lee maintains his optimism and unwavering commitment to music in spite of all the obstacles and setbacks. His continued creations and performances demonstrate that genuine passion remains. The contest for fame was never won by Jake E. Lee. He lost a musical soulmate far too soon, was fired when still at the top of his game, sought his most passionate band disband, and had his name removed from the credits of the song he wrote. But despite all of those setbacks, he never lost one thing: who he was. Jake was one of the most genuine guitarists, but he was never the best-selling, or most well-known. When he was unable to be himself, Jake took a step back, while others bowed to trends. He let his guitar do the talking while others bragged about their accomplishments. Additionally, he created tunes that were powerful enough to endure in silence even when cacophony dominated the airways. The life of Jake E. Lee serves as evidence that not everyone in the spotlight is actually glowing. Occasionally, light emerges from the shadows, as if someone is subtly maintaining the flame. Not for financial gain or fame, but just because life isn't the same without music. After a solitary upbringing, a lost job, and even a gunshot that might have ended it all, Jake returned. With a damaged hand, he picked up his guitar once more. In order to keep playing, he chose to put up with the agony instead of having surgery. Because music isn't a career to him. It is a means of surviving. Even if there isn't a statue with Jake E. Lee's name on it, he is always present when Bark at the Moon performs and when a budding guitarist attempts to combine technique with independence, speed, and feeling. No praise, no spotlight. Only one listener who really gets it. Which of Jake's eras did you find most memorable? His soul-stirring riffs with Badlands or his fiery years with Ozzy? Leave a comment below with your opinions. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell if you enjoy hearing about artists that don't require fame but yet leave a lasting impression so you don't miss the next inspiring tale. I appreciate you staying to the end.